Hello, everyone. I hope everyone is having a good day. I've decided I'm going to start doing a live a live video in this group every Monday. So you're going to be seeing a lot more of me. If we have not met yet, my name is Kira. I created this group to share insights and inspiration and reflections from my journey as a struggling adolescent to where I am now, which is supporting families and teenagers who are coping with many of the same challenges that I had as a teenager. And if we have not met yet, please introduce yourself in the comments below. I would love to get to actually connect with you. So I wanted to share today a framework that I have found to be really helpful for parents when they are supporting their child through frequent emotional spirals. And what I mean by an emotional spiral is like a panic attack, an extreme outburst, a very intense, like hours of sobbing, like when your kid is having like a really, really intense emotional experience beyond just like being in a bad mood. And so often parents just feel so helpless and terrified in these moments where they're watching their kid having like what seems like a breakdown and not knowing what they can do to try and support. And sometimes their efforts to try and support or to intervene end up making the situation worse or upsetting their child or bringing about even like more resistance. So I think this is a really simple and useful framework that you can use to kind of understand what emotional state your child is in, and then what to give them in both of those states, like how to give them what they need in different moments. So to first introduce this, I want to first talk about the nervous system. So the nervous system is your body's primary communication network. And that's what really signals you of safety or danger. And it can often override logical thinking. So our nervous system, for example, might be in a state where we feel really unsafe or really agitated or activated. And that will kind of undermine or limit our ability to think, more rationally or more clearly. So the nervous system, you've probably heard before of fight, flight, or freeze. And now they've added another one, fawn. But those are responses that are wired to keep you safe from harm. And that is the sympathetic nervous system. So this is the part of our brain that really kept early humans alive. Like it's what alerted us to danger and prepared us to run away, the flight, or to fight, like to defend ourselves. And when this part of our brain is engaged, the sympathetic nervous system, which is the fight or flight, the super activated state, the parasympathetic nervous system cannot be engaged at the same time. The parasympathetic nervous system refers to our rest and digest functions. So this is like when we're in a state of rest, we can digest food, we can fall asleep, our heart rate lowers, and also we can access our frontal lobes, which is the part of our brain that actually lets us process information. So those are the scientific terms, the parasympathetic and sympathetic. But what I like to use that I think is a little bit clearer is your teenager, your child, is either in a growth state or a coping state. So a coping state, this is when your teenager is highly activated. This is when they are in extreme emotion or distress, and they are trying to do anything that they can to minimize the intensity. They're only really in a position to cope. And then when their system is calmer and more at a baseline, that's what I would call a growth state. That's when they're more present and open and available and can actually have dialogue with you and have a conversation. Then they're in a position to grow. So think about for yourself like a recent time when you felt really frustrated or angry or distressed. I don't know why this is the one coming to mind, but I remember over the summer I was with one of my friends and her car broke down. We were like in the middle of nowhere on a hiking trail and her car broke down. And she was so stressed out about it. Like she was freaking out. She was like, oh my God, we only have like 2 drops of water. We have like 1 protein bar between the 2 of us. Like we're gonna die out here. And I was trying to problem solve. That's where my head was going. But it was such an interesting moment because I was trying to calm her down by talking about the solutions. I was trying to say like, hey, we can walk to get service. I actually have a lot of wilderness survival skills. We're not gonna die if you're with me. And trying to give her all of these rational reasons to allay her fear. But she couldn't even hear me. Like she was so stressed out, literally like in her mind, we were on the verge of death. So all of my logic and reasons were not getting through to her. And I've seen this with so many times I've worked with teenagers, like when they're in an extremely emotional state, if I go to them and I'm trying to meet them with logic and say like, well, here are the reasons why it's going to be okay. And here's what we can do. It's just going in one ear and out the other. They can't even hear me. Like when someone is in a coping state and they are that activated and that agitated and their nervous system is like, it's like hot, like it's like, you know, like hot to the touch, like really, really sensitive. They are only in a position to first get back to baseline. It's not the time for problem solving or dialogue or introspection. It's a time to just be like, okay, we need to take a couple deep breaths. We need to just bring it down a level. That other stuff, that comes later. Like right now, when someone is in a coping state, they're in a position to cope. And so what do you give someone in a coping state? And you've probably witnessed your child in one of these states when they're having a panic attack or a meltdown or a breakdown or just crying on the bathroom floor, sobbing, and you're like, I don't know what to do. What they need most from you in that state is your certainty. What they most need is to feel that you are the anchor and you are just projecting certainty. Even if you don't know how it's going to be okay, like what they're really upset about, you don't have the answer. You don't know what you're going to do. You don't have the solution. They're not looking for that because again, they're not hearing any logic that you're telling them in that state. What they most need is just your reassurance that the storm will pass. So your task in this moment is to call in all of your faith and all of your strength and resources and project to your child your certainty that they will be okay. That's what they most need when they're that overwhelmed and in crisis. And then, because even if that happens frequently, no one is in that state all of the time. When they are no longer in crisis, when the moment has passed and they found some calm and they're able to breathe, maybe it's a few hours later, maybe it's the next day. When someone is then at a baseline, then they're in a growth state. Because really, like, safety and security are prerequisites for growth. When we feel safe and loved and accepted, that's when someone can experience change and transformation and actually become inquisitive and introspective and be reflective. No one can do that when they're at like a level 10 activated. You don't have access to that part of yourself when you feel like you're gonna die. And that's really, as someone who was there as a teenager, that's really how it felt a lot of times at those moments. Like I literally felt like I was going to die. I was so sad or so angry or so anxious. And it wasn't a moment where I could have mapped out a plan or had a meaningful discussion with someone or done my trigonometry homework. All I could do in that place was cope. And the thing is a lot of teenagers don't know how to get out of those states, a coping state, without causing harm to themselves. This is why people use substances. This is why people self-harm. This is why people engage in behaviors that minimize the intensity of emotion by numbing or distracting. And it works in the moment, perhaps, but it's not actually helping someone in the long term. But that's why someone will do that that's why someone will do something harmful in that stage, because they are able to cope in that moment. And what they most need from you as a parent in a coping state truly is your certainty. They need you to be the anchor in the hurricane. And then when your child is in a growth state, what they most need from you then is your unconditional love. They need to feel that no matter what is coming up as you're having these discussions, or they're looking at these pieces of their life or trying to think about what they are going to do next, they need to know that they will be loved no matter what. And that's what really equips them with the bravery and the strength to heal. So I hope that this was helpful. If you have any questions after hearing this, I would love to hear from you in the comments. And I think another image that just came to mind is this stuff really, it's so automatic. It's like when you touch a hot plate, if you were to put your hand by mistake on a hot frying pan, you would just take it away. You're not thinking, your body's just reacting. And that's kind of like what a coping state feels like. It's like someone is in so much physical distress, and from the outside it can seem confusing, because you, as the observer of someone in this state, know that their reality is benign and that it's not actually harmful. You're not actually being chased by a lion. No one's actually gonna, jump out of the closet and hurt you. And the person who is experiencing that does not feel that way. It feels so, so, so real. There were so many times I was a teenager and I was having a panic attack or a complete meltdown, and I would be lying on the floor, crying my eyes out, my whole body shaking, literally feeling like I was gonna die. And I say this with no criticism to my parents, because they just did not know at the time. But my mom would tend to kind of join me in how distressed I was. Oh, thank you, Ruth. You're so welcome. I'm so glad that this is helpful for you. My mom would kind of, I think, in an attempt to validate me, and also because she was so nervous seeing it, she would jump into it with me, and then I would be more distressed because I'm wait, you can't be melting down. I'm melting down. Only one of us can melt down. And again, no criticism to her. She just did not know what to do at the time, and it was so scary. And then my dad would kind of just blink at me. He just had no idea what was going on. And this is kind of the middle ground of, you don't join them in their pain, because if you both get in the hurricane, then you're both swirling around, but you also don't completely leave them. Having the certainty is what provides an anchor that you can both co-regulate with, or you can, what's the word I'm looking for? Attune to, or anchor into. I can't find the word that I'm thinking of, but it's giving you something both that you can kind of use to come back to. What do we do when they shut us out? My son doesn't open up at all to me. So if your child is not opening up to you, the first thing to do, and I actually am going to make a video about this soon, is to work on building the connection and not trying to get them to open up about what is distressing them or what your concerns are. I have found in all of my work and with all of the families that I've worked with that a teenager opening up about what's really going on comes from having a solid and trusting relationship, and the teenager really feeling that their parent is not going to, and I'm not saying that you do any of these things, Shauna, but that their parent is not going to judge them or criticize them. Doesn't mean that you can't, I'm not saying you can't have boundaries and that you can't offer reflections, but a lot of times when teenagers are not sharing, it's because they're afraid of what the reaction is going to be, or they're afraid of upsetting their parent or inviting criticism in. And again, I'm not saying that you're doing that. But it's really about kind of dropping the expectation for them to be open about their pain or what they're going through, and first just building the relationship and spending time with no agenda. And spending time with them doesn't have to be, you know, you guys both go on a walk around the neighborhood and have this like whole day where you're hanging out and going to the movies and doing stuff, because your teenager might not accept an invitation to do that. It could be like you going and folding the laundry on the couch next to them while they're watching a show. It's just about meeting them where they're at and building the relationship there. And then from that place is where transparency comes from. But I do appreciate that question, and I certainly will address that in another video about like, yeah, what do you do when your teenager shuts you out and doesn't open up to you and you're concerned about what's going on? So just in review, if their nervous system is activated, they are in a coping state. Your child is only in a position at that moment to cope. And what they most need from you is your sense of certainty. And then when they are regulated, their nervous system is at more of a baseline, then they are in a growth state, and that's when they need your unconditional love. Thank you all so much for being here. It is my greatest honor of my life to do this. All right, good night, everyone.